Today, we're just going to go ahead and hop right into it. I, as always, am Lio Convoy, and I have a compatriot of comics here with me. His name is Jase. Jase, why don't you go ahead and give us your background concerning comics and what your favorite comics are?
Do you actually really want me to go off on this?
I mean, the people in my channel don't know who you are, so.
Okay. Hello. I'm a person who hates people on the internet. I got into comics when I was a kid, specifically thanks to the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. That's where I found out about the Punisher, became a huge Punisher fan, and as a result of that, became a comic book fan. There you go.
Short, sweet, and to the point. All right, so Jason and I, we talk about comics a lot in the server we occupy. Usually it runs people out of the room because they don't read comics because they're a bunch of dirty nerds in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I was about to say.
So when it comes to deconstructing videos like this and talking about them in depth and to make sure that people aren't lied to about things, because they tend to be with stuff like this, I bring on somebody like Jase because he's knowledgeable, like legitimately knowledgeable. He doesn't do the whole fake fan nonsense.
Fucking encyclopedia, Mr. Encyclopedia over here.
Oh no, yep. Terrible. I'm out seldom at your doorstop back when he used to do it. Let's see, Jase, does he lead the Lightning League against the evil forces of Saw Boss? I mean, do you, Jase? Are you part of the Wheeled Warriors? No, he's not.
No. I'm sorry. It was that sounds like an 80s cartoon reference, and at that point you lose me immediately.
Yeah,
because I'm not.
Jase is actually in his 20s. He's not the same type of boomer I am. He's a comic boomer, but that's about it. So I don't tend to talk about politics as a whole on this channel, but when people make false statements, I feel the need to address them because that is my moral value. And we have two people here that we're going to be covering today in two of their videos. And real quick, shout out to Missy, who did the art for the caricatures you see on screen here and in the thumbnail. They are horrifying. Thank you very much, small child Missy.
Why does Leo look like fucking Chester Cheetah is my question.
Because I'm dangerously cheesy.
Okay.
You walked into that one. But, all right. So, first guy we're going to talk about is John Talks, who did a video last year about how somebody admits there's a major problem with comics, and we'll get into that shortly. The other person is going to be Professor Geek. Now, most people sub to Professor Geek. Thank you for the super chat, Coyote. Is that Spoderman? That's better. Okay, Spoderman is better. Spoderman is fantastic. But the other person is Professor Geek, who rose to prominence when Thundercats Roar and She-Ra and the new Ninja Turtles were put out there. And unfortunately, while his Roar video was good, the other two suffered, specifically his Ninja Turtle one suffered really bad. And unfortunately, you see throughout it, he tries to dissect it on an intellectual level, the topics, but he's not very good at it. And at one point, he does a video on Dennis O'Neil, but we're going to get to that shortly. And just so you're aware, Jason and I, we are very fond of Dennis O'Neil's works. We very much so understand and appreciate his contribution to comics. But we're going to get into that later. Let's go ahead and start with John Talks, and hopefully we don't get a shutdown on this, because right now that dude's apparently having meltdowns about the election, not that I care. But let's go ahead and start this. Jason, you ready?
Yeah, I'm good.
What's up, everyone? John here. Welcome to another episode of John Talks. And finally, do we have...
So I stopped it. Are we going to do it like this, where we stop it?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Well, first off, I want to say, is anybody else, this is a nitpick for YouTubers and beginning YouTubers, is anybody else tired of this, hey guys, it's me again, I'm here to talk about this? Just get to the point. Hey, I'm John, I'm here to talk about this. Fuck, dude. Just so tired of it. But that's my nitpick. Sorry.
Do we have somebody in the industry, the comic industry, admitting that there is a problem? Okay? That there is a major problem. And one of those problems is that you don't have any new blood coming into the comic shops to read comics. And how often is it for you, a comic book reader and purchaser or buyer or whatever you want to call it, when you go into the comic book store, how often do you see young kids there?
Every time. I literally see kids there every time, often with their parents or teenagers. The gamut for kids, I guess, ranging from 3 to, 17. I see them there regularly.
Yes.
Action figure expert. I'm doing well, and we're talking about people making bad videos that have bad information. John, I don't disagree that the way that She-Hulk has been drawn lately is kind of bleh, but that's a subjective value. Let's go ahead and move on.
How often
Wait,
do you
hold on.
see
I wanted
boys
to
there?
Hold on. I wanted to say, so he asked, like, how often do you see boys there and kids and in comic book shops? I just wanted to say my own personal experience. Every time I go into my comic book store, I get stuck there for about 3 hours talking to the seller because me and him have become good friends over the fact that I just constantly go there, right? And we just end up talking to each other for 3 hours. And obviously, we end up talking to the customers that come in. Guess what? Most of the customers that come in are usually parents of kids that they like. So the parents were nerds themselves who were into comics, and they're bringing their own kids to get them into the same stuff that they were into. So it happens very regularly to see kids in the comic book store. I have no idea what this guy is on about.
Cocaine. Let's continue here.
How often do you see moms or dads bringing their kids in there to shop for comics? Again, compared to the middle-aged men in the comic book shops, it's a rare thing.
Only men.
I haven't seen that in quite some time, I'd have to say. In fact, I remember back when I was collecting comics in the 90s. That thing was a little more, you would see that actually happening, all right? I was one of those kids. But now you do not see boys riding their bike to the comic book shop as I did as a kid. No, you don't see.
Yes, now they ride their electronic scooters to the comic book shop.
More
instead.
importantly, how would he know? Kids and adults.
Yeah.
I have no clue what kids do because I'm not a kid. Kids are out of school while we're still at work. How would you know what kids do? And more importantly, how would you even have a metric or a tracking for this? This has no citation to it. This has no evidence. It's a personal statement, an anecdote that doesn't even ring true for the majority of people. Like most kids that go to comic shops, their parents take them there because it's usually within inner cities now.
Yeah, well, it's either their parents take them there or it's kids that are like 16 and they can venture out themselves without the parents, at which point you wouldn't see those kids because you yourself, well, I'm assuming you'd be at work. But, I mean, again, I'm giving this guy a lot of credit here. Maybe he's not working.
All right, give me a second
person.
here. Hold on here. I want to go ahead and post this in a couple places, the typical fashion, and of course,
unprofessional.
I'm very
unprofessional.
I never claimed to be professional, sir. How dare you? You
me
insert word that's supposed to be offensive. You fascist.
See,
gotcha.
See, I'm not Step, so that doesn't apply.
All right, so let's see here. Here on lunch break, cool. I mostly read my comics online free. We're actually going to address that in a bit.
Yes.
How do he says, yeah, comics were demonized like rock and roll? I mean, you're not wrong. They absolutely were. So does this guy go to his comic shop once a month? He probably does. I go less, but I also spend a lot of money when I go there. I'm actually supposed to go tomorrow. Let's see here. All right, so I want you to remember that he said he went in the 90s. All right, keep that in mind because we're going to touch on that.
I don't see any of that happening. Why? Well, I think there are different reasons. It's not just strictly because the comic book industry is dying because of the terrible material that they're putting out there and the SJW infiltration of okay, yeah, it kind of has a lot to do with that. But I
citation needed. Citation needed.
What a funny guy! What a twist that was! Totally didn't see it coming. A guy who's against SJWs bitches and moans about SJWs. Wow.
Also, I want to point out the article he's posting is from Bounding into Comics, which allegedly was made to be a comic website that didn't have bias, but it very much so has bias, and it very much so buries the lead. So, yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and touch on that, but we'll get into the SJW boogeyman here shortly.
I think with the advent of much better video games than we had in our day, and those other electronic devices vying for their attention, I do think that comes into.
So he just said the reason kids are more distracted away from comic books is because they have more digital shit to dig through. Specifically, video games are better than what we had. Have strongly disagreed. There's more video games today that are like meet the average scope, but man, video games in our time were way better, and anybody could tell you that at some point. Like 2007 was the holy grail of video games. Like fuck.
Also, real quick, Haruhi Suzumiya says Comicsgate was a mistake, unlike We Can Make a Difference. Well, I will agree. Comicsgate was a mistake. And we'll talk about them a little bit later, but let's go ahead and continue here.
But quite frankly, I just think that the books out there, they are not tailored or suited for younger kids. And I think that is a major problem for the comic book industry.
Dude, whenever they release books for young adults, for kids, people like you and the Quartering have hissy fits because of what they are.
Not to mention, he said, in the 90s, kids went to the comic shops. You mean to tell me in the 90s, most of the comic books were tailored to kids? Oh, yeah. Here's Spawn, little Jimmy. Totally for the little kid. Here you go, Jimmy. Enjoy this book about Spawn, about the demon guy who kills people and shit. Like, no. What?
Okay,
this has no...
Real quick, John Caulfield, most of the current writers in Marvel and DC are hired based on ideology rather than talent. I'm going to need a citation on that, but we're going to get into that more because there's a dark secret. I do need to tell you guys, a really deep, dark secret, but we'll get there shortly. All right, hitting play again.
And it seems that DC Comics writer Tim Seeley seems to think so as well. In this article titled, DC Comics writer Tim Seeley admits major problem of comic book industry. We're going to read this article. I, of course, will share my thoughts. Please feel free to share yours in that comment section below. Here we go. DC Comics writer Tim Seeley admitted one of the major problems in today's comic book industry. Seeley took to Twitter to write, boys ages like 10 to 17 kind of do need help getting into mainstream comics because they don't read them. We've essentially given up on them. Thank you. Finally, at least somebody admits that there is a problem, and this is a major problem of comic books today. Seeley's tweet comes in response to one from fellow comic book artist Jamal Igle, who stated boys don't need support getting into mainstream comics. And what are you talking about, Jamal? What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, clarify what you are talking about, because so far you just said they need help to get into comics. In what regard? Like, how are you going to help them
well, more
get into
importantly,
comics?
Okay, here's the thing, right? If I was a father, you know how I'd get my kids into comics if I had kids? I'd go look at the comics I had and introduce them to some classic stories. Like, Jase, what was the first comic you ever read? Like, first actual comic you remember reading?
Are you kidding me? I would not remember.
All right, remember buying then, because that's usually something people tend to remember.
It had to be something Punisher related, buying wise at least. So I can't remember what exactly, but go ahead. What's your point?
My first comic that I ever bought was Disney Afternoon, and I believe it was issue number 7. Right?
Okay.
Because it had Darkwing Duck on the cover, and I like Darkwing Duck.
Oh shit! Hold on, wait. I remembered. It was my first ever purchased comic book was something Donald Duck related. I'll tell you that now.
Yeah.
Actually.
So
there you go.
All right. So here's what you do when you're trying to get younger people into comics. You don't take them to the comic shop and have them buy the most recent issue of the most recent comic. You introduce them in the same way you were and get them adjusted to the character as a concept. So if I had a kid and I wanted to get him into Batman, because that's the character I'm most knowledgeable about and most fond of in mainstream DC or Marvel comics, I'd had him sit down with Batman Year One, The Long Halloween, maybe Nightfall, Hush, some really classic type stuff. Understand a character. Heck, I'd even go probably further back into the 80s, like Death in the Family or Lonely Place of Dying, because that's where I started with Batman type stuff.
I mean, to be honest, the most efficient way, in your case at least, if it's Batman you're aiming for, you'd probably sit him in front of that Batman the Animated Series first. To be honest.
Real quick here. Will you ever have kids lie out? No. Hyper Thunder, that's why manga is kicking out American comics worldwide and better than these books. Yes and no. There's a bit of a false dichotomy people like to make between manga and Western comics. And more often than not, people don't have a clue what they're talking about when they start talking about, well, manga, it's beating Western comics. Well, only in so much as people tend to go for it because there's a lot of material that's easier to get into. And more importantly, if you actually look at the quality of what you're getting, I wouldn't really say you're getting something better if you go with manga. But that's something case to case. Personally, I'm excited about Fist of the North Star getting a full manga release. But that's just me. Let's go ahead and continue.
I'm excited for Shaman King to be re-released soon, so that's what I'm excited for.
Kicker. Let's go ahead.
Go ahead.
He says this post was probably written by a guy who doesn't know who Ramona Frandon, Jackie Ormez, Joe Duffy, Annie Nocenti, Alethea Martinez are either. Boys don't need support getting into mainstream comics.
One moment, real quick. John Caulfield, if If you want citations, go to the Twitter accounts of most Marvel and DC writers these days. Just go to their Twitter accounts. They also tend to be pretty toxic to the readers. John, I'm going to make this very clear here, and I want you to understand because I know you're young. There's a concept called burden of proof. You made a claim. Therefore, the burden of proof is on you. Telling me to go look at XYZ is not my burden. It is yours. And again, we're going to cover why you are seeing something like that here shortly. I won't disagree that some of them aren't the best to their readers, but we're going to cover that a little bit later too. But let's continue on here.
Are you freaking kidding me? With the type of comics that you guys are putting out today, okay?
Like what?
Especially the type of comics that you are putting out today. Who are you?
He just like he repeated the same sentence and he didn't give any examples. Like, dude, if it's so invaded, right, as an industry, if it's so intoxicated with this SJW crap, then it should be absolutely zero problems for you to give me an example off the top of your head. Hell, I can give you an example off the top of my head from what you're talking about, which is what for me would be probably Captain Marvel. But see, I don't actually even know for sure if that's the case because I never read those books. I never will.
We're going to get into the whole politics aspect here in a little bit here. Yeah. But the person he is sitting here talking about, oh, he finally saw it. This guy, you need to listen to him. Tim Seeley has written some of the worst books that have come out. This idiot. I actually asked him a direct question. Tim Seeley, I'm referring to, a direct question on Twitter about something he did in the He-Man and Justice crossover, and his response was to give me a non-answer and play the "it depends on what you want to read into it" game. No, I don't buy that. Tim Seeley, he is a problem because his writing is garbage and people keep buying his garbage.
That's almost like Has Been Hotel all over again.
Oh, yeah, the difference is Tim Seeley at least didn't say, buy my merch, buy my merch, buy my merch, buy my merch.
Well, listen, if he had the chance, he probably would, though. So there you go. Let's carry on.
Trying to attract. Because to me, it just seems like you're trying to attract 30-year-old, 40-year-old SJWs out there who really aren't known for reading comics, who really don't read comics.
Real quick. SJW, using your terminology here, is somebody who's politically left-leaning, extremely left-leaning. I really hate to be the bearer of bad news, buddy, but they do read comics.
Right.
They do.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, but they do. And they also write comics, and they also draw comics, because here's the deep, dark secret. The deep, dark secret. Are you all paying attention? Entertainment as a whole, the people in it are usually extremely left-leaning, and I don't know why. That's just an industry fact. I can only think off the top of my head of all the people I know within industries. Off the top of my head, one person. Actually, no, two. I can think of two people that lean right politically. That'd be Flint Dilley, who worked on G.I. Joe, Transformers, Dungeons & Dragons, and oddly enough, Pokemon Go. And to an extent, Jim Cummings. That's it.
I got more.
Go
ahead. Chuck Dixon.
Really?
What? He's right-leaning, I believe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If I remember correctly. And hold on, there was another one, but I can't remember. He wrote Punisher Volume 2. I will not be able to remember.
Well, the thing is,
Mike Baron. Mike Baron.
Entertainment and art in general tends to appeal more to people with leftist ideologies. I don't know why. I have no clue.
Yes.
But even
except we did have a window when in the 90s it was more right-leaning in terms of like the writing and the way what we were being presented, but that was because what was his fucking name? The president. Who was the president during that period of time?
Bush. Or Clinton.
No.
It was Clinton.
No, the other guy.
What do you mean the other guy?
Well, whatever. I can't
Clinton
remember.
Was the president through the 90s?
90s? Oh shit. Well, I can't remember then. But anyways,
that's why the Animaniacs picked on him so much.
There's like a very right-wing president that you guys had.
Well, yeah, there was Bush before him and Bush after him.
Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. Well, whatever. Regardless, the point is
Reagan in the early 80s.
Yes, Reagan. Thank you. That's the one.
We'll bring him up. But also, John Caulfield, I'm going to disagree with you on that comment about most comic artists in the modern era draw worse than indie artists. You've got to stop getting your ideology from like right-leaning people and instead just look into things yourself.
Again, I can give you examples like Mark Cicchetto right off the top of my head. One of the best fucking Goran Parlov is in the industry right now. He's drawing really beautiful shit. There's so many great artists. I don't know where you're getting this opinion from. I mean, granted, yes, of course. I like the art style of Squirrel Girl, comics like that. Yes, it's gonna look like Tumblr tier art level there, but That's because that's the type of book it is. And if you're looking at it, well, that's your problem. Why the fuck are you looking at it? Go look at something else.
In general, for whatever reason, entertainment, art specifically, tends to skew very left-leaning in terms of people and political values. Even if you were to go onto Twitter right now, those of you who follow artists, ask them, where do you fall on a political compass? 99% of the artists you're going to talk to are going to fall on the left side.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead.
But yeah, go ahead.
All of your main readership of comics were the kids that grew up on this stuff in the 80s and 90s. And they are your only hope of introducing it to the next generation. It will be the parents that grew up in that time. Right now, they are your only hope. And if they don't introduce it to their kids, comics are dead. They are going to be dead. And the reason why they are dying and the reason why they are not introducing them to their kids is because the material sucks, okay? It absolutely sucks. And this is like the freaking fall of Rome or Pompeii, and people are just in absolute denial.
Yes, Pompeii is very well known for ending due to political values in art.
Did
the volcano go, like, I don't know, eat the rich as it spewed out hot lava upon anyone it could touch?
Pompeii was like just a limp-wristed loser anyway, regardless. So it's like whatever, dude. But what was it? He said something here about like if they don't introduce, the industry's gonna die. Wah, 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 panic, scared.
You can't do introductions on every single comic line. You can't. Not if you want to keep the readers who are currently reading, you can't just immediately go back to issue 1s and redo things every single generation. You can't keep it that way. What you need to do is, number 1, make sure the stories are good, obviously. And number 2, get good trade paperbacks at a decent price that can catch people if they need to. I started reading Usagi Yojimbo consistently back in 2007. Usagi Yojimbo is older than the Ninja Turtles. I'm up to date. You know why? Every single issue of Usagi Yojimbo has been collected in trade paperback form and has not broken since. So I can go back to Volume 1, Issue 1, and read it all the way to the current issue. And it's freaking amazing.
That's the same thing. Again, with me and the Punisher, I started collecting as soon as I moved to UK because in my home country, there weren't a lot of comic book shops. So once I moved to UK, I was like, oh, fuck, I can physically buy comics here? Oh, yeah, I can finally start collecting. And ever since, like, 2016, I've been collecting comics, Punisher comics, as much as I can. And I'm actually pretty far into my collection, proudly so. Mm-hmm. So, it's like... And eventually, if I have kids at some point or whatever, I have other comics that I have lying around that are mostly graphic novels. And some of them I'll just give to them and see like what they think of it and shit. Like, that's just a natural progression. It's not like there's some parent out there who's just sitting there going like, oh, as soon as I have kids, they're going to have to read this and this and that and this. Comic reading is a natural sort of evolution of like liking things. Like, dude, it's not this... Oh my God, the industry is on the brink. And by the way, to counter what he's saying a little bit here about the use, because I feel like he's moving away from the point.
He is.
I pulled up a research, did a quick Google search, so I don't know the authenticity of it, but like essentially what the research style is, share of young people reading comics or comic books outside of school in the United Kingdom. So this is the UK, not the US. From 2005 to 2016. And there's a graph, and they basically surveyed kids aged from 8 to 18 years old, all throughout 2005 to 2016 via internet. They surveyed them, how many of you read comics outside of school? In 2005, 50% of them said, yeah, we read comics outside of school. That's pretty good. It's a pretty good number. But then in 2010, it pivots all the way down to 26%. But here's the interesting caveat. From 2010 to 2016, it stays on that level. It doesn't go up or down. It stays. It never goes below 25% or above 28%. It stays safely in that area. So as much as he wants to whine about kids not reading comics, it seems like they are reading comics. It's just that the number of them isn't growing. And that's probably because once they grew up, then they're going to introduce their kids to comics, and that number is going to continue to stay the same all over again.
Yes.
But at least that's... Go ahead.
To address John Caulfield, do you think the comic industry is dying like most right-leaning commentary channels saying it is? No, I wouldn't say it's dying. It's shrinking, and how do he said that later on. But these people are doomsaying because it makes them feel good to do so, because what they're seeing in books isn't something they like. And we're going to get into that. But the biggest problem in comics, other than the occasional writing problem, is price.
Yes.
It's price. And the fact that digital copies of comics are the same as the physical copies is a major turnoff.
Yep, exactly. And also the problem of renumbering issues, not allowing a series to run for longer than 20 issues. Constantly renumbering to number ones because companies are afraid that the readers will lose interest and they need to just cash in on that number one every single time. That's another massive issue with comics.
And, you know, there's a lot that goes into these problems, but nobody's actually sitting there looking at it long run. Because this dude, he cites the 90s constantly. Comics almost actually did die in the 90s. DC and Marvel both were on the brink of bankruptcy. But these people keep... And even Razor Fist, somebody who definitely leans a little further right than, like, even me and maybe Jase do, would tell you, what he did a video, why are you talking about the 90s as though they were some golden time? They were terrible for comics.
Oh, they were, yeah.
Absolutely abysmal. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's continue here because we got points.
Niall, they have no clue what's going on, especially the ones in the comic book industry. They really don't get it. They really don't understand that this cannot go on forever. I don't know if they just think that they're going to get paid no matter what, even if nobody is buying the books, even if nobody is reading the books. But comic books have been on a downward trend, okay? It is a dying industry. And if you can't even bring back old school comic book readers like me, all right? If you are not even bringing back the former audience that you had, if you can't bring back that readership, what makes you think that their kids are going to be reading your comics? Think about it. And I was at the comic book shop the other day, and there's just nothing that would appeal to boys. I mean, sure, there's maybe a couple titles out there, but when I think about Marvel Comics of old, when they had, you know, just back in the 90s, this kind of awesome stuff. The covers were dynamic. The art was dynamic. It was something as a young kid that I just loved looking at.
Dude, what you're talking about is nostalgia.
That's exactly what it is.
You're not talking about factual statements. You're talking about nostalgia. That's all this comes down to. Was the art in the 90s fantastic? 90% of the time, sure. But
sometimes.
Unless it was Rob Liefeld. But, like, dude, I read comics in the 90s, too. I have a lot of 90s comics, but they were having some serious trouble. And this dude's talking about, well, you don't make comics that appeal to kids. Why don't you go look at the readership of the Sonic the Hedgehog comics?
Oh, fuck. I remember I read a little bit of Archie comics, right? Just a little bit, I remember. And I remember there was this issue that I don't remember what it were. I think it was right around the time they were introducing, funnily enough, right around the time they were introducing Shadow the Hedgehog into the comics. And the art in those issues was abysmal garbage.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, too. Yeah, that was bad. It was funny.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's like I saw that type of art in various Marvel comics in the 90s, or at least the 90 releases, because I was just a little baby in the 90s. In the 90 releases, plenty of. So I don't know what he's talking about. Like, I love the fact that he, as examples, he gives all the fucking essentially AAA comics hanging off his walls. You know, the fucking X-Men, the most bought series ever. You could see Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man over there and shit like that. Well, no crap, dude. If I hang up all the best movies of Hollywood, then I'll say, oh, there's no problems in Hollywood back then because all the greatest movies were made. It's like, what the It's such a stupid point.
Real quick, Leandro says, what about those weebs that say her, it's because comics recycle the same characters all the time. Nothing new comes out. Should we shove them in the near shower? No. You shove them in the locker and you take and eat their lunch money. Notice I didn't say take their lunch money and buy lunch. I said eat their lunch money. And here's why. Any weeb that tells you that the U.S. recycles their characters too much, ask them how Pikachu and Goku are doing. Then we'll talk.
Don't even just ask that. Just ask them, hey, how's that unnamed protagonist doing that is always not sure of himself but always climbs to the top? I mean, like, whoa. We want to talk about recycled characters.
Real quick, Kecker's Boy, my comment about 90% of the art being good, that was in the reference to comics as a whole, not specifically Sonic comics, because I remember, and some of it was horrible. Sonic now understands.
Was it the Titans? Okay. Apparently, Shadow didn't show up until later in the 2000s in the comics. So, again, but still, the art was pretty bad in there. So that's what I remember specifically.
Shadow had guns. Anyways, continuing on.
The art. I mean, even if the story sucked, I still enjoyed the art. But even back then, the stories, I feel like they were tailor fit. Like whether you were a young kid or whether you were an adult, they were still enjoyable. Now, today's comics, I read them, I try to read them, and there's just no enjoyment to them. The art is just bland. I feel like some of these artists need to pick up Stan Lee and John Buscema's book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Because
John Talks, I have a better suggestion. How about you teach us how to draw comics?
Or at least
because
give us
clearly,
examples of what you're talking about.
that's the most annoying thing. He goes like, I read today's comics and they're not really good. I'm like, well, tell me what you've read. Tell me what you've read and I'll tell you what to read instead, because clearly you're too dumb to buy something good. How about the current Venom run? How about Cosmic Ghost Rider? How about the fucking, how about Punisher Kill Crew? How about, what else was there off the top of my head? There was something else. I can't remember it anymore. There's plenty of shit, dude. Plenty of shit. It's just that they don't look at it because hatred doesn't sell. Like, if you compliment something, people aren't going to watch that. But
yeah, let's continue on.
Again, the art is just so bland. There seems to be such a lack of detail. It almost looks like illustrations for a coloring book. I mean, honestly, who should be interested in this stuff? And you're asking for $4 a copy? Get out of here. I don't know about you, but what kind of kid is going to fork over $4 for a comic book? Now, back in my day, I could buy a comic book for $1.25, and that was at least seemingly much more affordable for me.
Do I need to explain to you, grown man, what inflation is?
yeah, I was about to say, what was like the economy back then? Like, what happened
Better.
since?
The economy was actually
Exactly.
good.
Exactly. So it's like,
Also,
What?
like, I don't know where these people are getting this idea that modern comic art is all really bad. Like, I
don't get it.
I just showed you art, and you don't even read Batman. I just showed you art from one of the most recent Batman runs, and that art is fantastic.
Exactly. I mean, again, look at. I know I will come off as a broken record, but look at Punisher Kill Crew, released in 2019, beautiful art. Look at Punisher Platoon, beautiful art. Punisher Soviet, beautiful art. Cosmic Ghost Rider, so many examples of great artists just busting their ass, and it's like there's no good art. All art sucks.
I do love me some 80s and 90s comics. I'm a big fan of Jim Aparo. He is my bar none favorite comic artist. Same with Norm Brayfogle. I love these artists, Kelly Jones, but I'm also not stupid, I'm not dumb. So I understand art's going to change. Do I miss those artists? I absolutely do, especially the first two, because they're gone now, and I'm never going to meet those people. But
Right.
things do change, and they digitally color things now. They may very well digitally draw some of these things. There's going to be a difference. That doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I'd say it's pretty doggone solid. Let's see here. Leonardo says, but there is a point in the making. What about those big companies that prefer to use characters in their media, like movies and games, don't care about them in comics? Well, that's their problem, and the comics industry itself should care about them on their own.
Exactly. The whole point of like I've become disillusioned with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm so tired of the movies because it's the same shit over and over again. And when I go read comics, I don't even have the movie stuff in my brain. Like, I'm going to comics knowing fully well that that's a separate entity. No matter how much they want to blend the two together, I know for a fact that it's a separate entity, and it doesn't destroy my enjoyment of the comic itself.
All right. So
should the industry care? Hold on. Should the industry care more about their characters? Probably, but neither here or there.
Disney must absorb. Anyways, continuing.
I mean, it's difficult for me now to justify paying $4 for what you get in a comic book nowadays because it's all just a bunch of fluff anyways. I'm sorry, I could go on, but let's get back to the article.
Oh, no, please elucidate for once in your miserable life. I'm sorry, continuing.
Seeley's diagnosis of the comic book industry is nothing new. We've pointed out here numerous times that comic book sales are on the decline. Given Seeley's diagnosis, the big question has to be, why have boys abandoned comics in the comic book industry? Common answers will be the rise of video games offering a different, more interactive form of entertainment that can capture
the rise of video games? I'm sorry, is this the same sentiment as when you're not going to get it, Leo, but maybe somebody here will. Where anybody remember when Telltale's Walking Dead came out and there was articles upon articles talking about the rise of adventure games have just come, like this game revives adventure games. Never mind the fact that adventure games never went anywhere. They were always there and people always enjoyed them. And the same with video games. There is no rise in video games. Video games have always been there. They've always been enjoyed, and that's always been there. Like, what?
Also, I'd say
Comic books have.
I'd even
go
say
ahead.
comics were a lot more divisive in the 90s because there's a reason why they call it the console wars for a reason. They were taking shots at each other in marketing. Like, good God.
Right. Exactly. Keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Storytelling and visuals comics offer. However, there have always been other forms of entertainment in the past, and comic books were able to thrive. And as Stan Lee points out in the video below, people will pick up and read a comic book if they are intrigued by the story. Others will point out that the high price point makes it difficult for kids to get into comics exactly. Not only does each issue sell for typically $3.99, which is ridiculous, but in order to keep up with your favorite characters, you have to purchase at least 2 or 3 books, and that's not including the almost quarterly crossovers from the big two in Marvel Comics and DC.
Arguably the most incorrect statement ever. Ever.
Like Nightfall. Here, I'll put it this way. Nightfall, a big 90s event, right? In order for you to have every single issue across the multiple DC titles, they'd released like a 9-volume trade paperback assortment, 9 or 10 volumes of actual trade paperbacks to cover every single issue from there. This idea of, well, they're cross-promoting it through their different titles, that's something not new, you dummy. Holy crap.
Yeah. Not only that, it's also the fact that this statement couldn't be any more wrong because, as I said, one of the main issues that I have with comic book industry today is the practice of renumbering their ongoings. So, like, let's say a character gets an ongoing and it lasts about 16 issues, 20 issues max, at which point Marvel or DC will shut it off, cancel it, and then they will start a new series with a brand new number 1 because the number 1 always sells better because it's the beginning of the series and people can confidently buy it thinking that they don't need any previous knowledge of the character. So, people buying books for the sake of not wanting to read up on the character's history is more accessible today than it was back in the 90s or early 2000s where ongoings could go all the way to number 169 or some shit.
Correct.
So
real quick, Kicker's Boy, I agree. There are too many crossovers. We could get into that some other time, but oh god, there's too many, and they're all stupid. But let me go ahead and continue here because I want to get through this video, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the aspects there, and then we're going to get into the second one. So let's go ahead.
Marvel Comics legend Stan Lee, while discussing the appeal of comics, revealed that children learn to equate pleasure with reading when they read comics. It's quite possible that these younger boys no longer find pleasure in the current crop of comics that are being produced by Marvel Comics and DC Comics. If they aren't finding pleasure in being entertained by the comics, it's more than likely they won't continue to read them, and as Seeley notes, will abandon the industry and medium altogether in favor of one that will provide them with pleasure. And if they aren't finding pleasure in those comics, one has to look at the actual stories being produced in the comics. And the lack of pleasure might come from the way modern comics are depicting their iconic superheroes. As YouTuber Thinking Critical points out in regards to the current Batman series, Tom King has a real gift for making his characters as annoying as humanly possible.
Real quick, I've seen Thinking Critical's videos. Thinking Critical's a moron. Like, he is one of the YouTubers where his screen name is absolutely the inverse of what he actually is. He does not think critically. He does the same thing all these other idiots do, and he doesn't understand the topic he's reading.
I'm sorry. I wish John Talks had an inverse of his channel.
Shut up. Yeah, I agree. But let's.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be addressing some of this. So let's go ahead.
With his pretentious tropes. I don't know about you, but Batman and the majority of his supporting cast should never be described as annoying as humanly possible. I could not agree more. Again, these are stories that are meant to be tales of escapism, tales of wonder. The kid in us and actual kids out there do not read comics to see the real world.
Marvel used to be called the world outside your window. If you were an actual comics fan, you'd know that.
I was about to say, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, there is no other city in Marvel except for New York. Why do you, literally, why do you think that is the case?
It's about to get worse. It's about to get worse. So let's continue.
Okay, great. They want a fantastical version of reality. Okay, they want something that is a form of escapism, and that's something that video games offer for young kids nowadays. And when kids read their favorite stories, they do not want to read a story about Batman being human.
I'm gonna let that sit. Batman's appeal is the fact that he is just a human. And Tom King made some mistakes on his run. I will give him that, but Tom King understands that trauma rewrites a human's brain, and the entire point of the Rebirth Batman Tom King run is how it has done that to Batman. And anybody who's going to try to argue Batman is not created by or driven by trauma is either an idiot or a liar.
I mean, do I need to remind these people that Mask of the Phantasm is considered to be one of the greatest Batman movies of all time, including and in that movie, Batman, or AKA Bruce Wayne, literally cries at several points because, hey, his guilt of his parents dying does not allow him to have a happy life. Yes, he's driven by trauma. Yes, he's fucking human, and that's one of the biggest reasons people like the character is because he's human.
It's about to get worse.
Go ahead.
It's about to get worse.
God, fuck.
Being annoyingly human. We should not be able to relate too easily to Batman or Bruce Wayne.
We shouldn't be able to too easily relate. Yes, Batman totally isn't relatable. People have totally not gone through trauma. Actual orphans have never read Batman and thought, this is so freaking cool. No, that's the appeal, is because he's relatable. Because everybody's gone through that. The reason why people can look at Batman's story and say, wow, I can understand why this kid who watched his parents get murdered after watching a Zorro movie would dress in a bat costume and beat on criminals. Like, good
Yes,
God.
exactly. It's like, well, I don't even understand his point of they don't want him to sympathize with the character. Let's take another character, for example. Let's take Darkwing Duck, because that's the closest analog for Batman, for example, right? One of the reasons people like Darkwing Duck as a character, right, isn't because he's a fucking pompous asshole that just gets the job done all the time. They like him because he's actually a loving, what is he, a father to the little duck?
Dad of all things.
Yeah, he's a loving adoptive father, and that's one of the reasons that why people root for him and don't find him annoying. Like, the human aspect is necessary. Like, what the fuck? Oh, okay.
Let's continue.
Okay, we want our heroes to remain heroes. Okay, we don't want our heroes to become more like us, because these amazing.
Because the average person can't be a hero. Fuck you, buddy. Fuck you.
Heroes overcome evil, and they deal with strife, and they deal with great conflicts. I'm sorry, Batman is still very much so a hero. So is Superman. And hey, to tell you, Superman's pretty relatable too. Dude works a freaking 9 to 5, and he has to deal with like bureaucracy among his own peers. He has a mom and dad that live in the country that he can't always take care of. Yes, these characters are meant to be relatable because they're written by humans, you mentally deficient cretin.
What my favorite, okay, so two things. I read this Superman comic recently. It was like an anniversary thing or whatever. I don't remember what exactly it was. But in it, Superman just revealed his identity as Clark Kent to the world, right? And the very first thing he did is fly to his math teacher's window. And he was there, sorry, sir, can I talk to you? And he's like, oh, it's you, Mr. Kent. And he goes like, I wanted to fly over to you and tell you that I never cheated. With my superpowers, I never cheated. I promise you that. And I'm like, and the teacher goes like, well, of course you never cheated. You only got like D's and like, brilliant. It's like fucking great writing. But like, to further point, I love how he just dumps a load of crap on himself and his audiences, essentially saying, no, neither I or you can be a hero because we're regular people. It's insane.
We don't read Batman to see a regular person do heroic things. That's totally not ever been what Batman's about.
Exactly. Right? This guy just blew my mind into the next century.
All right, we gotta continue. We're almost done. We can get through, Jase.
Characters with their superpowers, they gave us a sort of benchmark as a point to strive towards, or a point of something that we should try to be or emulate, a higher form of morality, a higher state of virtue. That sort of thing that kids should try to strive for. But kids do not want to see a character like Batman being demeaned by Tom King.
Tom King doesn't demean Batman. Tom King shows... If you really think Tom King's demean Batman, I really hope you never go back and read Batman in the late 70s and early 80s. I really hope you don't, because he gets the crap kicked out of him because he's just a human. And unlike some modern writers, these older writers remember that. So when he goes toe-to-toe against a super villain that he's never faced before, he gets wrecked. You aren't a comics fan. You're a nostalgia-blind simpleton.
Who wrote the comic where Batman peed himself because he inhaled weed?
That would be Kevin Smith.
I forgot. Kevin Smith. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, just so you're aware, the big He-Man fan on Midnight Edge's channel thinks that it's going to be a fantastic new He-Man show that Kevin Smith's writing it, by the way. I'm like, that man doesn't make references. He's mentally deficient. Anywho, continuing on.
Just don't. It's also possible they vacated the industry because they saw an organized publishing initiative to replace their heroes with younger female alternatives. Marvel Comics spent the better part of almost half a decade replacing their iconic heroes like Tony Stark with characters like Riri Williams. They replaced Thor with Jane Foster.
It's not a replacement. They only stayed in issue circulation for as long as it took to get people interested. Guess who's still Iron Man? Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm. Tony Stark.
And Thor is Thor still. Jane.
Hey.
Go ahead.
Hey, guess what? And Jane is also, by the way, sorry to cut you off, but Jane is also still present in the comics. She's still one of the members of the cast of the Thor comics. So it's not like they just replaced her or Thor and then threw her away after a while. No, they kept her on. And I'm pretty sure she's still active. But furthermore, replacements aren't that bad. Remember Superior Spider-Man, how Doc Ock became Spider-Man? That series was pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, at the time, a lot of people complained about it, which is, of course, change is always frowned upon. But looking back on it and reading it, it was fucking great. It was a great series. But I bet you anything, if that were to happen today where like somebody proposed, okay, now we have Spider-Man be replaced by this guy.
SJWs. But all right.
SJWs. Yeah.
Let's see here. Out about Starscream. Did I just stumble into Lyle versus Professor Geek? That's going to be the next video we watch, so stick around. Let's see here. Batman didn't become Bat God until Grant Morrison. Yeah, but the difference is Grant Morrison did it in a fun way because Grant Morrison's horribly insane. They came out as non-binary. That's cool. Whatever. And I actually mixed it up with somebody. A real segue here. Mixed it up with somebody in Midnight Edge's Facebook group who's like, Grant Morrison's just trying to tick off the boxes to stay relevant in the industry. I'm like, the dude literally believes he went into a spaceship that Jesus had, and that he was given the ability to cure cancer in cats. But you think this is crazy. No, you don't know Grant Morrison. You're just an idiot.
Well, see, he's crazy because he confused Jesus for Alan Moore. I mean, come on, who makes that mistake?
Well, I mean, one is God incarnate, the other is the incarnation of the snake god that hates all
Snake God.
we can talk about him later, but no, that's just it's dumb. But continuing on here.
And they replaced Wolverine with X-23 and Honey Badger, and to me, this stuff makes absolutely freaking no sense.
Hey, 90s boy, how about when Batman was replaced by Azrael? And by the way, the intention beforehand wasn't to bring Bruce back. Or how about when Superman died and was replaced by 4 different people, all having some, except for Steel, he was at least honest about it.
Hey. Wait. Sorry, cut you off. Remember Superman's new outfit in the 90s? The lightning one? Oh, everybody loved that one, didn't they?
But no, like, what you're raging about happened in the time you're saying comics were better, you mentally deficient goon. Why do people listen to people like these, Jase?
Clone Saga.
No, don't you ever speak that evil on this channel.
What a great story that was, huh? What a great story, Mark.
Don't remember. They still have untied threads there. They're going to use again.
Right. Yeah, they did reintroduce Ben Reilly as a villain of some event at some point. So, yeah, they're totally going back there.
Continuing.
I don't understand why they do what they do at Marvel. I just don't. But they want to show everyone how woke they are, people who really don't give a crap about comics. And regardless of people's politics in the comic book industry, I just have to say I'm happy somebody is acknowledging this in the comic book industry. I'm happy that Tim Seeley was willing to say, no, you're wrong, Jamal. You're wrong, all right? Boys are not reading comics anymore. They are just...
Hey, maybe
What's
Tim
your
Seeley could have done something about that instead of having He-Man go edgelord supreme and introducing a whole bunch of violence and terror and darkness in any He-Man book. Maybe, just maybe, Tim Seeley actually would have done something about it. But no, he doesn't, because he doesn't agree with you, you moron. Tim Seeley's part of the actual problem in comics.
somebody said to you, Kicker's Boy says, the intention was always to bring Bruce back. The whole idea of Azrael was to show audiences how terrible changing Bruce would be. We weren't supposed to like ass-bats.
Well, I don't think that's accurate, because when you look at the interview they did with Denny O'Neil, bringing Bruce back and keeping him sidelined and keeping up to date with him was something that the editor demanded.
Right.
I don't think that was the initial intention. I think the intention, based on what Dennis said, was to see how people would respond to a new Batman. I don't know if I think if he was successful, they never would have brought Bruce back. I don't think the intention was to ever have him come back. But Kecker's Boy, like, why don't you hop onto the Thundercats Discord server and, like, we can chat, because you sound knowledgeable and that's rad. But let's go ahead and continue here.
Not. And how are they going to bring back the old customers into the store, hopefully get their kids interested in comics, because I feel like that is the only hope for the comic industry. Those are just my thoughts. Please let me know yours in that comment section below.
No, I think I'll let you know mine like this. But, okay, so now we're going to get into the politics part. All right? People like him like to claim comics shouldn't be political, or comics don't have politics in them. So I'm going to bring up some stuff here. First and foremost, let's see here. Where did I put it?
Nice segue.
Yes, thank you. Let's see here. Let's talk about, and this is specifically Denny O'Neil's work, let's talk about the time Hal Jordan was called out for being, well, a racist. About how, now keep in mind the setup here, because unlike these people, I know context. A slumlord was kicking tenants out of an apartment complex. And Hal Jordan happened upon the scene as they were dealing with the slumlord, protected the slumlord. Arrow showed up and said, knock it off, Hal, these people have a point. And this gentleman walked up to him and said, I know you've helped all these other people, all these aliens with different skin. Why haven't you helped people with brown skin, man? Like, you're an earthling. And Hal had no response because he hadn't done anything and he knew it. And yes, this is socio-political. I'm so sorry that the old comics also delved into it. Go ahead, Jase.
That's not the only example. I mean, again, we're going to talk about Denny O'Neil here soon.
Because we're not only do we have this, let's talk about showing actual political figures in comics. Like when Green Arrow was talking and telling Hal about how there's a problem with the world and how it's sick, because we just, in that decade, lost two major civil rights leaders. We lost MLK and we lost Kennedy, and he's literally showing them on screen. And let's go ahead and talk about how Hal was talking about how he has a job to do. And Green Arrow's response was, the Nazis said the same thing. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and take a segue away. Let's take a segue away from DC for half a second. Specifically from Denny O'Neil's writing. Oh, wait. Let's go back to DC, because I want to point this out. This is from the 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
A comic promotion where Superman tells his kids not to judge each other by their race, color, creed, or country of origin, because anybody who does so is un-American.
Mm-hmm.
Un-American. So, yes, it's still that is political, especially at that time, but I don't even have to do DC. Let's talk about Marvel. Captain America, who is only loyal to the dream. If you are going to try to tell me Captain America by nature is not political, you are a lying sack of crap.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And since we're talking about politics again, let me hop back. These are different decades, by the way. Hop back. Let's talk about, everybody knows what Dark Knight Returns is. Everybody knows. Guess who they took shots at? They took shots at Reagan. Reagan's the reason why Superman had to go.
They did.
Yeah, he's the reason why they had to go take why he sent Superman to deal with foreign powers. He sent Superman to deal with Batman when he got out of control by his own metric here. Yeah, they took shots at him. And here's one for Jase. Let's go ahead and remove the dream. Here's one for Jase.
Yeah,
it's about the Punisher seeing that cops are trying to usurp his symbol and use it as a unifying force, and he rips it up and tells them, if you keep it up, I'm going after you next.
Yes. There was a lot of people speculate in that situation. It's a recent issue. I'll be real quick about this. A lot of people speculate whether Marvel forced the writer to do that or not. I don't believe so. Mainly because even among the Punisher fans, the general consensus is yes, cops should not be flying a fucking skull anywhere on their uniform or their cars because you're supposed to be a servant of peace, not flying the symbol of a psycho vigilante who kills people. Like, that's not a good idea. And don't think I'm just bashing like the right here. The left and like other people who are against the cops having a symbol, they're just as dumb because usually they try to co-opt the symbol for their own reasons and they try to go fly it for their own side. And I'm like, why are you flying the symbol of a fucking vigilante killer? What's wrong with you? But yeah, so that's how stupid it gets.
Well, the thing is, like, anybody who say these are not politically charged, I'm sorry, but yes, they are. Every single
always
one of them.
been.
And again, somebody had mentioned this earlier in the chat, but yeah, X-Men's also a good example. Politics and comics have always been intertwined, and they always will be. Now, if your argument is they are not written as well, I can understand that, because you're right. A lot of modern comics, when they deal with political issues, it can be extremely ham-fisted. But again, they always have done political issues. Civil War was a criticism of the Patriot Act.
Yes. Yes. Indeed. And it's like, again, even within Civil War, which was a criticism of the Patriot Act, because it consisted of so many parts and crossovers, it criticized every little minute part of like politics of that time that it could, because it reflected perfectly for the story, because the story was in itself very politically charged.
Yes.
There's politics always in comics, always have been, always will be. The only reason people now notice them is because, one, there's fucking assholes that want to
They want to rage
the
bait.
status.
They want to rage bait.
Yeah, they want to rage bait and get all the clicks, And then two, there's people who are getting so into politics that they just see it everywhere. Everywhere. It's like Alex Jones on every corner, dude, telling me about the frogs turning gay. It's ridiculous.
Autobot Starstream says the real question was the comic tearing down Reagan any good? I mean, it was the Dark Knight Returns, you tell me. Let's see here. Kecker's Boy says, it's the usual. It's only political if I disagree with it. Yes, that is exactly it. Here's why I want to say that. Everybody here knows what Comicsgate is. Everybody here knows there's a lot of indie developers and distributors there. All right, somebody I know, a friend of mine, somebody I call a friend at least, Mark Pellegrini, him and his company, or the company he works for rather, they produce a lot of different comics. But one of which is called My Hero Magademia. And it is a very pro-Trump comic. You know how many people I've seen Comicsgate complain about the political statements in those comics?
Just a meme.
None.
Chill
None
the
of them.
fuck out.
None of them do. They are inconsistent in their values. So yes,
Fair
Kecker's
enough.
Boy is absolutely correct. It's only if it's politics I disagree with.
Can I read a comment here?
Yes, you may.
Autobot Starscream. Punisher. Don't look up to me. Look up to Captain America. Captain America. Hail Hydra. Punisher. I was like, accurate. Accurate. That would be funny if Punisher himself didn't end up working for Hydra later on. So.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the Professor Geek video. Let me go ahead and paste that. And let's go to it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor.
All right, it's longer, but we should be able to cut through it shorter. All right, Professor Geek talks about a lot of nerd-related things. In some cases, he tries to deconstruct things. In some cases, he tries to argue them intellectually. But in other times, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. If I were to actually do a response video to his Rise of the TMNT video, I'd destroy this man. And this is an actual professor. I just want you to be aware. It's not just a name. He actually is an instructor. So let's go ahead and look at it. Now, this is supposed to be a video about things you can learn from Denny O'Neil. Now, I love Denny O'Neil. Fantastic writer. Fantastic guy when it comes to...
It's kind of a sneaky love, too, because you always kind of like... You knew his stories were there. You loved them, but you never realized how much you loved them until he died.
Yeah. God, I do miss that man. But let's continue in here.
Geek, welcome back to the channel. And today I heard the sad news about Denny O'Neil's passing. Denny O'Neil was truly one of the greats in comic books. He had an understanding of them that you just don't find today. You find it today, but you don't find it among those actually working in comic books today, sadly. He was an incredible writer, and I wanted to talk about specifically some of the lessons I think people need to learn from Denny O'Neil. This is part of his legacy that I think we need to insist that comic book creators keep in mind today. Whether that means those that end up with the shattered pieces of anything left over from DC or Marvel, or whether it just means people writing their own comics.
Yes, the shattered pieces, it totally isn't you guys trying to do doomsaying on everything. You guys totally do read modern comics. I'm sure, absolutely sure. Anyways, continuing.
These are invaluable lessons that sadly very few people take to heart. I know a lot of people have been doing some great tributes to Denny O'Neil, and people who've worked with him or have perhaps a greater insight into his career. I just know that everything I've ever read of the man's I thought was just incredible. Really was impressed with him as a writer and an editor, both of those things. So the first, and I've talked about both of these aspects I want to bring up, these lessons. I've mentioned them both before in different videos or different live streams, but I want to put them both together now as a tribute to his great work. The first thing I want to mention is he knew when to admit he was wrong. Comics have forgotten how to do that. Comic creators do not know how to do that.
Factually incorrect. Many of them have admitted when they've done a wrong job or they've done a poor job or a job they haven't necessarily liked. This dude doesn't keep up with anything. He just parrots whatever he hears.
Mm-hmm.
They are simply incapable of admitting when they've made a decision in continuity or with a character or with the universe that was wrong. Denny O'Neil made the decision back in the day to strip Wonder Woman of her powers, not take away the costume and just make her sort of a secret agent. And he had decent motivations. I mean, he thought he was doing the right thing. He thought he was trying to make it so that, you could just have an example of a strong woman in comics who didn't need to rely on powers or this and that. He thought he was doing the right thing for young women reading comic books. It was made abundantly clear to him by many, many people, Gloria Steinem included, that was not the right move for Wonder Woman, that she was there representing how a woman can do the exact same thing as Superman can in the context of these comic books, with powers and with the costume and all of that. And Denny O'Neil realized that. He said, you know what? You're right. I was wrong. And he fixed it. He gave Wonder Woman back her powers, back her costume.
If that happened in the modern age, Geek, you and all of your cronies would be saying that he cucked out to the feminists.
That's one thing. That's one way to look at it. Another point is that how long was that Wonder Woman run? How many issues did it last?
I don't think it was very long, but I'm not completely sure. Real quick, I want to address here. Harvey Pliskin asks, is it wrong for someone to experience comics as a means to escape from the real world? Well, no. There's nothing wrong with using escapism so long as it's not a fill-in for dealing with mental issues, mental health problems, and so long as you do understand what you're dealing with. But every form of escapism is going to have a tie back to reality because that's just how things work.
It's how you base your things on. Like, you can't escape reality. Even one of your most enjoyable. I'm assuming. Okay, I'm looking at the name Harvey Pliskin, right? I'm assuming you're a big fan of Escape from New York, maybe Escape from Manhattan. Was it the second film? I'm not sure. I love those movies. I love the second movie, the sequel. I love it to death, more than the first one. And one of the reasons I love it is because Snake Plissken, the main character, is this dude who doesn't want to be there. He just goes like, fuck, man, get me out of here. God damn it. I don't want to be here. That's a real life situation, real life reaction to a lot of the things I have where I'm like, I don't want to be in this. Get me the fuck out of here.
Especially if you're in New York in general. That's usually your mindset.
But there's always these little tidbits. If you write them properly, you can always escape from reality, but your enjoyment comes from the fact that you recognize it as something similar most of the times that you can relate to.
All right, so let's continue on here.
Era of her, there's still good stories written in that era, but and I recommend people check it out just for the writing, but that was a wrong move to make for her character. And instead of trying to pretend that nope, it's right, instead of being like Marvel and just saying, nope, it's your medicine, you've got to take it even if it doesn't taste good, Tom Brevoort, or trying to be like Jim Lee or Dan DiDio and say, nope, that's just, we got to shake things up, got to shake it up, or people aren't going to be interested anymore if we're not constantly changing and pulling the rug out from under you. You couldn't possibly want to buy comics without us doing that. No, he realized that was wrong and he fixed it. And I just respect him so much for that.
You do realize he also shook up the foundation of Batman at the time too, right?
Not just Batman. Not just. I mean, I mean, Green Arrow and
Yeah.
Green Lantern.
Yeah, he shook up a lot of things. So does this
The
guy?
question, for fuck's sake,
This
dude.
guy doesn't actually know Dennis O'Neil at all, does he?
Well, his claim is that in those other aspects, I guess he's trying to point out is that like with Batman, with these other characters, nobody really complained as much. But because with the Wonder Woman thing, so many people did complain about, he was able to recognize and fix that mistake. And you know what? Fair enough. I can agree with him there. If Denny thinks he made a mistake, right? Then okay, that's cool that he was able to admit to himself that he made a mistake and that he himself fixed it, right? That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I just don't get this idea of give me examples of modern comics artists doing that. You're talking about this stuff. Examples, please, would not hurt at all.
Real quick,
You know?
Autobot Starstream says thoughts on the incarnation of all consternation. Carol Danvers, I don't care because I don't read her book. Vinkman, greetings and salutations. Hello, Vinkman. Glad you can join us on a live stream that's actually active. Kecker's Boy says all art affects people because affecting the people is the purpose of art. Well, yes, you're not wrong there. But one thing I have absolutely noticed about anybody in Comicsgate or anybody who does these goofy little types of videos that do rage baiting, do you ever notice they always cite people that can't tell them they're wrong? They always cite dead people. They tried to do this with Darwin Cook years ago, too. Darwin Cook would agree with Comicsgate. His widow came out and said, no, he would not.
Oh, really?
And
oh, wow.
They did not take well to that. They tried to argue with his literal widow about what he would or would not value. They never choose people in the industry that are still alive to try to play the he would agree with me game.
Right. I would love to one of these guys give example of Donny Cates. To me, in my opinion, solid writer. Does a lot of the characters he covers justice, right? I mean, in my opinion, again, he's in the Marvel right now. He's in the industry right now, right? Why don't you give him as an example and see what he says about like Comicsgate and all these rage baiters? Yeah, I don't think he'd agree.
Oh,
but I mean, I'm
people
assuming
have asked him. He doesn't respond well. Let's see. Here. Fear Further One says thoughts on Comicsgate. Here's my thoughts on Comicsgate. All right, here's my thoughts on Comicsgate. Either of them. Comicsgate is asinine. The people who were behind it are asinine. They are either rage baiters or they are grifters. And if anybody had any reasonable sense, they wouldn't be following their nonsense. I literally got into it with Comicsgaters over Superman Smashes the Klan, which is a book that is based on the 1940 radio play, which in the real world did in fact expose the actual Klan because they were worried that it would be used to attack conservatives. They shouldn't be talking about the Klan. They should be talking about Antifa. And they tried getting on to me. Well, would you get mad if Batman attacked Antifa? I said no, because Batman's fists are rated E for everyone. You're missing the point that this is based in the 40s, you idiots. It's based on a previously done radio play. And for the record, I really recommend the comic too, which was made for young readers because it was a good story, doggone it.
The art was pretty good too.
Oh, it was, I mean, come on, man. Come on. You know that artist. He's really good. Gwynpool did really good art. He also worked on Power Rangers, oddly enough. But again, and the same, one of the guys I was arguing with, he calls himself Josh the Amazing Animator, which is the most self-aggrandizing name I've ever heard, and he's really not an amazing one, was going on about how we're not filled with a bunch of racists. And then immediately I look on his timeline, he's got a comic where Connie from Steven Universe says that she's been healed by Steven and she's a blonde-haired white girl now. I'm like, if you're trying to convince people that you're not racist, you're doing a very, very bad job about it. Anyways, let's continue on here since I've answered those questions.
But the second one that I want to mention is one that I tend to talk about a lot whenever I bring up Denny O'Neil. And I just have got so much respect for him when I heard him say this. It was in one of those comic book documentaries, The History of Comics or whatever. It's a common story that he tells. But when he was editing Batman, he was editing the Batman run during the time that they were killing off Jason Todd. And if you remember the history of that, they had done a call-in vote for readers. You know, this is Jason Todd, the second Robin, who had turned out, you know, developed into kind of a snarky, bratty little kid, bratty little Robin. Dick Grayson had gone on to be Nightwing at the time. So they did this call-in vote for readers. You could call this number if you wanted to vote for him to stay alive, or vote for this, or call this number if you wanted to vote for Joker killing him, and killing him won out. So they were going to kill off Robin, and that was in all of the papers and everything. Kind of like Superman's death later. no one really cares about comics until you hear about this one beloved character or whatever that they happen to know from a TV show or a movie or comics maybe they once read when they were a child or whatever. So that was in the news and it was a big deal. And he said that he went to lunch one day into this deli and he had a little Batman pin on his lapel there in New York City, when DC Comics was still based there. And somebody asked him about the Batman pin on his lapel and he said, oh, well, I edit Batman comics. And the guy behind the counters, yelled over to somebody else and said something like, hey, Louis, this is the schlub who wants to kill off Robin. And they were all very angry at him. In their mind, he was killing off Dick Grayson's Robin, the Robin they knew from the Batman 66 show, or the Robin they always knew from, Batman and Robin. They're a team, they're a thing. And Denny O'Neil said he realized everybody's looking at him angrily. And, he realized in that moment that he's not just an editor of comic books. He said, I realized that I was a keeper. I was a guardian of American folklore. Can you imagine a comic book creator?
He said custodian.
Oh, sorry? Custodian was
not guardian.
Okay.
No, let's continue. I wanted to make that point. Give me a second.
Using that language today, they have absolutely no context of that.
Neither do you, Geek, because your argument is they're not doing what I want with the characters. And you're not going to give me any actual examples of your argument here. But let's continue.
Superheroes are not even remotely American folklore to the creators we have today. The fact that Denny O'Neil acknowledged that, just I take my hat off to him so much that and that's really the way he conducted. And I'll get to that in a second. But these characters aren't American folklore to people like Nick Spencer. They're tools to preach your politics through.
Which is what Dennis O'Neil also did.
Yeah,
regularly.
He did preach his politics. I mean, well, we covered this too extensively, but so many writers, they insert their politics, maybe sometimes unconsciously, maybe consciously, who knows? But if the story doesn't suck, I don't care. I mean, look at The Question Volume 1 by Denny O'Neil. Not only did he revitalize the character in a very radically insane way, very different from what it was originally supposed to be, right? That's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the whole series of The Question was taking place in a shithole hub city that was run by a drunken mayor who was concerned about my guns, gotta get my guns. What does that remind you of? It's he was criticizing extreme right-wingers even in that comic throughout the whole run. It was always there. And it was, hey, guess what? It was good. It was actually really fucking good. So, I don't see the problem there. He always did this.
Well,
and it's so I don't...
Not just that, but in Dennis O'Neil changed The Question, he changed some core aspects of him because The Question was created by Steve Ditko, who was a what's the word?
Right-winger.
Well, I don't even know if that's the right term for him, but he was an objectivist.
That's the one. Sorry. Yeah.
He intentionally put his politics into his characters. He was so ingrained in his value systems that he would quit if he could not be allowed to write characters the way he saw fit. Mr. A, The Question, a lot of his characters were absolutely reflections of his personal values.
Yeah, Mr. A was essentially the prototype Punisher to an extent, whereas it was just a guy who saw black and white, and then of course, that transformed into The Question a little bit later, and he, of course, softened up on those themes, but still kept them intact. The original Vic Sage under Steve Ditko was this guy who just went out and kicked bad guys' asses because they were bad guys, and it's just good and bad. There's no in between. And then, of course, Denny comes along and reboots the character and turns him into this Zen Buddhist philosopher he's always stuck in the gray area of things. He doesn't see just bad guys and good guys, or at the very least, the life in Hub City doesn't allow him to see just good guys and bad guys. He's always conflicted about who's the good guy and the bad guy. And he hates himself even more every time he tries to solve a crime because it always turns out the crime isn't as obvious as it was,
Real quick, the Kicker's Boy, wasn't Joker the ambassador for Iran? In Death in the Family, yes, he was made an Iranian ambassador for a specific terrorist cell because his point was to kill everybody. And Batman couldn't touch him because he had diplomatic immunity. So yes, politics was absolutely touched on.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So I don't get this point of he never inserted his politics in it. Everybody does. For fuck's sake, just get over that.
All right, so continuing on, then I'll address what Autobot Starscream said. Well, let's keep going.
Well, actually, I'm going to stop it after he talks for a little bit because I have another point, but let's go.
Sure.
These characters aren't American folklore to Dan DiDio. They're tools to stroke your own ego with, to shake it up, to be cool like Marvel or whatever. These characters aren't folklore to Tom King. No, they're tools for which I can work out my own trauma. They're not American folklore.
Tom King understands the core nature of who Batman is better than you do, Geek.
Yeah, that's one thing, but like he's giving up these names, and I don't know, maybe not, right? But I can give you just as many names in return who do have stands similar to Denny O'Neil's. Let's take, for example, Greg Rucka. In my opinion, Denny O'Neil's successor, maybe protege. I don't know how to exactly call him, but he's somewhere in that area, in my opinion. None of them exactly called them each other like that, but like in my opinion, because Greg loves Denny's characters. He loves comic books. He always writes true to the character stories, and he's the one who took a lot of Denny's characters and took them to the natural conclusion that they were supposed to reach, right? Let's talk about Donny Cates. He's also the guy who clearly loves comic books, who clearly studies the characters.
He cites Donny Cates in this later on.
Oh, okay,
in
good.
The negative.
As a negative. Okay, let's talk about. I'm not done though. Let's talk about, like, I don't know, Chuck Dixon. You know, who fucking loves comic books. He absolutely loves the characters within the comic, and he's still in the comic industry. Oh, for fuck's sake, let's just mention Garth Ennis. As much as he hates superheroes, as much as he despises superheroes, even he has some sort of religious worship of Superman. Like, it's like insane. Like, there's so many great writers that have this very respectful view on comics. It wasn't just Denny, and they're not in the number of such writers are not in the minority list. It's like, come on, dude. Come on.
Continuing.
Or to Scott Snyder, they're action figures. He can dress up in new costumes and new characters and new stories and all this kind of nonsense. They're certainly not American folklore to Brian Michael Bendis. He just comes in, does no research, pisses all over the wall, and calls it quits and says,
"Oh, so he has something in common with you."
Because he's had a great run. Pardon me, but that's just the truth of it. It's a shame, and I'm very saddened by the passing of Denny O'Neil. But I'm terribly saddened as well.
Did he just cut himself off?
Yes, he said he's very. I think he trailed off. But you're so sad about his passing, but not sad enough to where you won't use his corpse as a bludgeon against artists and writers you don't like. You worthless goon.
Exactly. Another thing is, for those of you who have a YouTube channel or want to start a YouTube channel, don't do what this guy does. He's clearly rambling without a script, just for shit off the top of his head. If you want to do like an actual analysis and stuff, actually write your crap down. Trust me, you'll do a lot more better that way.
That he wasn't working in comics. Now, I know he'd retired, but the fact is we have a lot of great creators who have done amazing work and who are still capable of doing amazing work, who are consistently passed over by the people in charge. Just
citation needed
for those hot new writers. For whatever reason, somebody thinks that a Scott Snyder or Tom King story is going to sell more than a Jerry Ordway, you know, or a Marv Wolfman. Or, I mean, these people are still out there doing great work when you give it to them. What in the world is wrong with you, comic producers and publishers? I just don't understand it. So that's the second lesson, is to realize that even if you're just a independent creator, you know, and you're writing your own character that is not ingrained in the American consciousness, write it as though it was, you know, write it with archetypes in mind, and write it with the gravity of the importance of comics and what they do to American mythology in mind. And perhaps your character will become that one day. You know, it's don't just treat it as some light fluff. Some people did at one time, but it's grown beyond that. I mean,
the problem is you're making an argument from intent that you cannot prove. And if you're a professor, if you are genuinely a teacher, it frightens me that you do not understand the folly of that.
What is he a teacher of? Do you know?
I have no idea, and I don't care enough to look into it. Continuing.
American comic books, and especially specifically comic book superheroes, are a uniquely American art, and they've transcended just America. You know, they've become mythologies for a lot of different cultures now, and mythology has power. So keep that in mind. Don't treat it lightly. Don't just jump for the spectacles and the shake things up and this and that.
Yes.
Or how about?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, or how about you just treat it like a normal thing and just have fun with it? Because I guarantee you that's what Denny had when writing his comics. he had some level of fun with it. You know, that's the core point. If you don't have fun with it, why the fuck are you even doing it?
Yeah. Do this thing, but not that way. Do it in the way I want. That I will never actually tell you what I want. Don't write Batman as though he's dealing with trauma. Batman's not driven by trauma. Don't write Superman as a family man. He's not a family person. These people are stupid. Continuing.
The third lesson is about the writing. The writing has to be there.
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Denny O'Neil wrote an amazing book, DC Comics, How to Write Comics. I forget the exact title. If you look it up, you'll find it. People always ask for good books, and there are a lot of good books on comic writing out there, but his is the go-to. Denny O'Neil's How to Write Comics. It's like the official DC How to Write Comics. It's great. He gives you examples of scripts. He gives you the terminology. He tells you the different ways to approach writing scripts. And more than just about comic writing and like the technical aspects of the script, he gives you good writing advice, incredible writing advice at last. Also, it's just, I recommend people pick it up. It didn't matter what he approached. He always treated the writing as something that needs to be on point. You know, I haven't read everything he ever wrote, and I'm sure he obviously grew as a writer, you know, from the stuff he wrote early on.
I'd argue you probably haven't read anything he's written, because the points you're making are counter to everything Dennis did.
Ever did. Yeah, exactly.
Continuing.
But I've read things. His Batman stuff back in the day was just phenomenal. When Batman 89 came out, the movie, it was so popular that DC had to create a new Batman title because Batman and Detective were selling off the walls and they needed a new Batman title.
You mean Batman 89, the Batman that shook things up, the Batman that went very far off script for who and what Batman was? That Batman that you're not ever once going to address in this video as being part of the larger symptomatic problem, both within the movie and the comic industry? Idiot.
Title. So they did Legends of the Dark Knight, and it was incredible. And Denny O'Neil wrote that, and it was a Batman, a beginning of his career Batman, not necessarily fresh off the streets or anything like that, but it was the beginning of the career Batman. It's a phenomenal run. I highly recommend people get it. Batman Shaman. It's in a bunch of different collected editions and different volumes. He approached that this gimmick, you know, it seemed like, oh, we just need a new line. We need something else at a time when anything with the word Batman on it was going to make money and be successful. He didn't phone it in. He wrote out good, solid stories that hold up today and hold up with the character. He didn't rely on spectacle. He didn't think, oh, well, we got to do something new. Everybody else is doing Batman. And at the time, everybody was. There was Batman everything in the stores. There was Batman everything on TV, and it's just everywhere. Everybody had to get a piece of the Batman. So, you know, he could have easily done the Scott Snyder route. No, well, how can I shake this up and make it a earth-shattering multiverse fabric of reality event or whatever? No, he just sat down and he wrote a good, solid story completely in the character of Batman that people already loved. He knew how to do that. He knew how to respect his characters. He knew how to respect the writing, the craft of writing, to tell a good, solid story. I learned so much from him reading his books and reading his book on how-to writing.
Clearly not. Clearly not, because all of your complaints about the current comic book industry are exactly what Denny did in his comics to some extent. So it's like, what?
Yeah. Let's not shake things up. He shook things up regularly. He's the reason why Joker went back to being a mass-killing homicidal maniac.
Exactly. It's the reason why the Question became a philosophical Zen Buddhist and all this other crap. Like, he always shook things up. Like, what? It's just that he didn't shake things up to an extent that he's referring to. Like, there was no galaxy-wide issue or threat or whatever. But, like, in terms of changing characters, he did that regularly. And to success, of course, because he was a good writer.
The man knew what a splash page was for. It's not a freaking establishing shot. You're not writing a film. You're writing a comic. Put a hook.
A splash shot can be an establishing shot, and it can blow your mind. Garth Ennis's Hitman showed me that with the dinosaur issue.
Right?
Look in there, you know. I mean, he just knew these things, and he was phenomenal at it. So, I'm going to mourn the passing of Denny O'Neil / celebrate his life by reading some great Denny O'Neil works tonight. I've got so much of his stuff. I'm talking about Batman and Wonder Woman in particular, but he wrote and edited for a lot of other great runs as well. I recommend you just throw his name in Google.
He's gonna bludgeon people with his corpse.
So fuck. It's like, I don't even know I don't even want to attach malice to this guy because again, I don't watch his content, so I don't know what it's like.
I'm not. I will never. I will never say there's malice there when stupidity can excuse it.
Exactly. I think it's just he doesn't realize how stupid it sounds what he's saying. And I think that's a fault of all. Well, you know what? I'm not willing to do the same for John Shuts Up or John Talks or whatever the fuck his username was. That guy was obnoxious. Fuck that guy.
Cool. You'll find something that you're interested in because you worked on so many different things. So it's sad that we've lost Denny O'Neil. It's incredibly sad that people who still are alive, like Denny O'Neil, aren't getting a chance to create wonderful comics anymore. And it's the saddest of all that nobody is learning from these wonderful lessons that Denny O'Neil has left us and that other comic creators have left.
I'm sure you're the only one who learned all the lessons here. Mr. fucking Denny O'Neil Encyclopedia over here. Professor Geek. Ask me anything. Goddamn, dude.
Us as well. So fix this. I mean, the comic industry's dying and good riddance to it, honestly.
Wait, why should I fix it if it's dying? Like if it's dying, then fuck it.
They've been saying it's dying for like what 20 years now. Is it ever?
I was about to say.
Is it ever gonna actually die, guys? I mean, we're at the point to where I might as well treat you guys the same way I treat people who say they know when Christ is coming. You're both morons.
It's like, dude, like I swear to God, I've seen these types of videos 8 years ago now. I'm still here. I'm still reading comics. I mean, granted, with the COVID, things have slowed down in publishment, but still coming out.
Right,
so
we're almost done here. So let's power through this stupidity.
Because nobody at DC or Marvel, knows what's what and how. Even with the shakeups and the firings, nobody who knows what they're doing is coming into any kind of power at either of those places. So the burden then falls. The burden of this great American art form of comics falls to the independent creators. Whether you're writing your own comics and putting them on crowdfunding, or whether you're just selling them on Amazon or whatever, or whether you're going to start pitching them to independent publishers. This is where the future of comics is, the comic industry. And whatever happens with the beloved characters and our American folklore characters, whether they go into public domain or not, the archetypes are still there. The archetypes are still there, and nobody owns the copyright on those. So learn about them, use them. That's what my channel's for. I have a ton of videos about it. One of these days, I'll get out that archetype book. I promise. In fact, this is the very next project. So we'll talk about that. I'm in talks with a publisher and everything.
Sure you are,
but
buddy.
That's all I have for today. Very sad to hear about Denny O'Neil's passing. Let's celebrate his great body of work and learn from the wonderful lessons that he left behind. And until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.
All right. So real quick, if you guys want actual comic people to follow on YouTube, Chuck Dixon does have a YouTube channel that is severely undersubbed that you need to check out. But if you're looking for comic reviewers, I recommend two channels primarily: Matt Draper and Comic Tropes.
Ah, nice.
Both are fantastic comic review channels that look at things honestly, that look at them as best as objectively possible, and look at the art and the writing standalone. That's how you do this. But this guy can't, because he does not have the mental acumen in which to do so. Now, Autobot Starscream said a while ago he'd like to see Geek and I talk. I'm open to talk to anybody, but I don't think he's going to like me because I'm very, very mean. And I certainly don't think he's going to like talking to Jase because Jase is meaner than I am.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, I can have a civil conversation, but if you're going to make stupid points, I will throw, often an insult at you or whatever. But it's just the way I talk. But point is, I like the fact that you suggested Comic Tropes. That guy is great. He's fucking great, dude. He's amazing. I love his content. And if you want like actual fucking comic book analysis and lessons on like how to write comics or how great comic book writers wrote their comics, you go and watch that channel. That's a great channel. Atop the Fourth Wall sucks, and Linkara can go fuck himself.
Angel, I actually see Linkara every year at Onicon, and every year he looks sadder and sadder and sadder.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall.
Linkara is a really good example of, if you do step into the online sphere to put out content like this, cover your freaking tracks.
Yeah, and don't like don't spurg out when your tracks get revealed at the very least. Like, oh my god, Linkari is just a tragedy.
Nice.
A tragedy in every release.
I don't have to worry about covering my tracks because the majority of my internet shenanigans were like going on Transformer message boards and looking at toys. All this
Literally the same.
telling you like what my kinks are and what type of porn I like. Never something I did because it's not something I partake in. I don't have to worry about any of that. If anybody were to like really look into me, they would get bored within minutes because I'm very, very boring.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, well, that was John Talks and Professor Geek that we covered there. Both men have very false YouTube channel names, very opposite of what they actually are or should be doing. John specifically should shut up most of the time because he's
too
annoying.
busy doing videos every couple of hours because apparently he's really mad about the election results.
Well, riding with Biden, you know.
Oh, God.
Riding with Biden.
Not on my channel. Don't start that garbage. God.
I'm actually not American. I don't care.
No, he's not American. He lives in a shut up a stan.
Shut up a stan. Accurate. Maybe soon it will be at some point, you know. And
All right,
I hope John Talks moves over here.
All right. So do we have any other questions from the chat before we close out the stream today? I'll go ahead and give it about 2 minutes just in case. Jase here does put out YouTube content, but he does it on Stalin's channel. He really likes to talk about Has Been Hotel. He really likes it.
Basically, I don't have anything to pitch, so you don't have to try hard, Leo. You'll probably see me at some points in some points somewhere on the internet, and you won't even remember where you saw me or heard me. So,
all right. So real quick, Evelyn, I saw you on another channel. I think it was Anthony's talking about how you wish you had a Senate link. So I'm going to post it in chat. Feel free to hop in. Anybody else is welcome to, but I warn you before you hop in. This is not a server I own, and it is cutthroat. If you give people an inch, they will make fun of you until the day you leave. So I've given you your warnings. Be aware.
Essentially, I'm from that server as well. I'm a local therapist there, and yeah, if you go in there, anything can be said, any slur, anything, whatever can be said there. You're not going to get banned for that. So if you're easily offended, might not be the best place for you. So
no, Shut Up Stan isn't near Kekistan because Kekistan doesn't exist.
Kekistan is on fire right now. It exists, but it's on fire right now because, you know, the election didn't go the way that it was supposed to.
But yeah, the link's in the chat. There you go. I see Vero has found it. The local Disney fan person.
Is that server 4chan? You know, no, it's not as bad as 4chan because we actually have some rules where it's exactly we have some values that you're not allowed to post illegal things or whatever. But apart from that, yeah.
When I announce what I'm about to do, live streams on Patreon, I'll try to keep that in mind, Vinkman, but they're usually so doggone spur of the moment.
Yeah, he literally messaged me today while I was sleeping. Hey, are we doing this? I was like, dude, I'm still sleeping. What the fuck are you doing?
But yeah, no, the server's not 4chan. We actually have an absurd amount of rules, but...
Rules, yeah, totally. Rules. You can come in and you can take a look and then you can dip out if you don't like it. It's not like, you know, you're fucking chained to it.
Combat is a very important rule.
Spoon.
Rule 207, obey me, is the most important one, and I abuse it horribly. Further one, I am a minor and new for your channel. Well, welcome. I do not tend to say no words, so good. I don't agree with Comicsgate. Well, neither do I. There is a case here in Brazil about a comic artist that made a picture of his character punching an ex-president. The guy was infamous for his corruption, but he was left-wing. Huh, interesting.
How far meme rules? Senate. Okay. Well, I'm going to close this off for myself with, yep. I just realized I can ban you from the server, Leo. I didn't even realize that.
I can ban you too. We both got the doomsday trigger.
Oh, no. I can ban myself. Ha
ha. Show everybody. Anyways, you guys have a good time. Thank you for joining me, Jase.
No problem.
Later, guys.
I'm good. That's it.